Alright, so today we'll be working on 10.3, solving radical equations. A radical equation is an equation that contains a radical expression with a variable in the radicand. To solve a radical equation involving a square root, first use properties of equality to isolate the radical on one side of the equation. Then use the following property to eliminate the radical and solve for the variable. So, squaring each side of an equation. So, if two expressions are equal, then their squares are also equal. So in other words, if a is equal to b, then that means that a squared is also equal to b squared. So that might be a little confusing. I'll show you an example of what that means. So for example, let's look at this problem right here. We have root x plus 5 is equal to 13. So to make our life a little bit simpler, we're going to get rid of this 5 first. So how can we get rid of this 5 though? Well, we can subtract 5, which would eliminate this positive 5. And we got to do the same thing to both sides. Which leaves us with root x is equal to 8. Oh, let me make that a little bit clearer. Alright. Now the next thing we're going to do is, in order to eliminate this radical symbol right here, how can we eliminate it? We're going to square the entire thing. So let's rewrite this. So we're going to square both sides. And when we square it, we get rid of this radical, which leaves us with x is equal to 8 to the power of 2, which is the same thing as 64. So that would be your answer. X equals 64. Now let's try another one. Similar again. 3 minus root of x is equal to 0. So, similarly, we need to get rid of anything other than this radical right here. So let's get rid of it. So we can get rid of it by subtracting 3 on both sides, which leaves us with negative root x is equal to 0 minus 3 is negative 3. And once again, this negative is outside, so we're going to try to get rid of that as well. So we can divide this whole thing by negative 1. Remember that if there's nothing written in front, we assume it's a positive, we assume it's a 1. Which leaves us with root x is equal to, negative divided by negative is positive, so 3. And now, we can get the square root of these two. Let me rewrite it again. Remember, whatever you do to one side has to be done to the other side. So, radical x squared is equal to x. 3 squared is equal to 9. And that'll be the answer. Now we're moving to a problem that's slightly more difficult. Alright, so for this one, once again, we need to get rid of anything that's outside of the radical. So that includes this 4 and that includes this 3. Which one should we get rid of first? We want to start with addition and subtraction first. You could technically start with multiplication and division, but it's easier to start with addition and subtraction. It's less work for us in the end. So we'll subtract 3 on both sides, leaving us with 4. X plus 2 is equal to 16. And now, we can divide this whole thing by 4, right? We need to get rid of everything outside this radical. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And now, to get rid of the radical symbol again, we can square the whole thing by 2. The square of this is x plus 2. 4 squared is 16. And now we can get rid of this 2 by subtracting 2 on both sides. So then x is equal to 14. Alright. So now we'll be solving an equation with radicals on both sides. So notice in the previous example, we only had a radical on one side. Now, it's on both sides. Alright, so for this one, you might have guessed already. If you haven't, try to pause the video and see if you can figure it out. We're going to... Oh, that's unusual. Okay. We notice that both of them have radicals, which means if we square both sides, we can get rid of the radical symbols on both of them, leaving us with 2x minus 1 is equal to x plus 4. And this is pretty straightforward. So now, we just need to isolate the variables. So we need to get all the variables on one side and all the numbers on the other side. So let's subtract x on both sides. So we move this one to that side. And then 2x minus x is just x minus 1 is equal to 4. And now when you get rid of this plus 1, this negative 1, so let's add 1 to both sides. So we're left with 4 plus 1, which is 5. And that'll be the final answer. Alright, now we have root 5r minus root 8r minus 2 equals 0. So notice in the previous example, the two equations with radicals were on the opposite sides, right? And in this case, they're on the same side. So what we'll do is, we'll just move one of them to the right side. So let's go ahead, and since this one's a negative one, let's move that one. So then both sides are positive. We want to try to make both of them positive just to make our own lives easier. Okay. 8r minus 2 is equal to 0. So let's add 8r minus 2. Add 8r minus 2 to this side. Remember, whatever you do to one side has to be done to the other side. Leaving us with 5r. What is going on? 5r is equal to 8r minus 2, right? And we can square both sides, leaving us with 5r is equal to 8r minus 2. What do you think the next step might be then? We need to get rid of all the little numbers over here now. So we need to isolate r by itself. So we need to get rid of 8, 5, and negative 2 and try to isolate the variable. So let's go ahead and move 8r to the left side. So let's subtract 8r, right? Since this is positive 8r, we're going to subtract 8r. 5r minus 8r is negative 3r minus 2. So now let's divide this by negative 3 so we can get rid of this negative 3. And remember, the goal is to isolate r. Negative divided by negative is positive, and 2 divided by 3, which is the same thing as r is equal to 2 over 3. Alright, and that is it for this assignment.